Climate justice, defined by Indigenous dreaming, is an invitation into complexity, a surrendering to the truth and a reckoning of this extractive society. In order to revitalize possibility, we must dream the Indigenous dream. And so we dream climate justice.
Three, two, and you're live.
Bija'yu awawa, or Bija'yu Yongona. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Sunshine Manning, and you're joining NDN Live today as we talk about some really exciting news for NDN Collective, and that is with the beautiful launch of the Climate Justice Campaign. And joining me today are a couple members of the Climate Justice team, Jade Begay and Kailea Frederick. And we'll be chatting with them today and talking about this exciting week of climate justice launch activities. But before we get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about just framing up how climate justice embeds itself into the work of NDN Collective. But really quickly, a little more about myself. So I'm a citizen of the Shoshone-Paiute tribes, and I'm also a descendant of the Chippewa Cree tribes of Rocky Boy, Montana. And I've been with the NDN Collective since our launch and been a part of just witnessing the shaping of our multi-pronged approach to build Indigenous power. And NDN Collective, as an international serving organization through various different strategies. We seek to support Indigenous self-determination, Indigenous movement building, and justice and equity for all people and the planet. And one of the ways that we do that is through supporting sustainable initiatives throughout tribal communities, throughout Turtle Island and surrounding island nations, and also with a lot of our campaign work. So with us today is Jade Begay, Director of the Climate Justice Campaign, and Kailea Frederick, Climate Justice Organizer, to tell us just how their work supports our mission and how their work in this new campaign is really unique, and how it's going to be bringing an Indigenous-led focus, an Indigenous-centered focus to this time and space that we're in where climate justice is critical. But that being said, I'm going to just do a quick little introduction of Jade and Kailea. And of course, Jade and Kailea, when we get into our conversation, please do feel free to introduce yourselves a little bit more. But starting with Jade Begay, she leads the Climate Justice Campaign. She's Diné and Tesique Pueblo of New Mexico. She leads NDN's Climate Justice campaign work and brings extensive experience working in climate justice movement spaces throughout Turtle Island and within Indigenous communities across the globe. She's also worked as a multimedia producer, filmmaker, and communications professional working in nonprofit and Indigenous organizations. She has a bachelor's degree in film and video and a master's of arts degree in environmental leadership. And she was also recently appointed to White House Justice Advisory Council under the Biden administration. Really exciting news. So happy that you're here with us. And Jade is also formerly a member of our comms team and was able to help really build out our narrative strategy for our work. So really grateful to be here, Jade, speaking with you in a different capacity.
Thanks, Sarah.
Right. And Kailea Frederick.
Happy to be here.
Yep, sorry about that, Jade. Yeah, really glad you're here. And Kailea Frederick, Climate Justice Organizer, is a mother of Tahltan, Casca, and Black American ancestry. She grew up off the grid in Maui, Hawaii, and feels raised by quiet spaces intimately tied to Hano, our island earth. I apologize for pronunciation there. She's a graduate of the International Youth Initiative Program and a Spiritual Ecology and Boards and Commissions Leadership Fellow. She has been a youth delegate to the United Nations Climate Change Conference twice and currently serves as the editor of Loam and as commissioner of the Petaluma Climate Action Commission. Her prayer is that those on the front lines of climate change and extractive-based industry are able to find justice and peace for their communities. She is currently raising her family on Coast Miwok land in Petaluma. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Kailea.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
All right, so diving in a bit to this conversation today. So Jade and Kailea, as members of the Climate Justice Campaign team, have produced an amazing, dynamic climate justice campaign that is for us, by us, and is really different. And throughout the course of this week, we'll be rolling out some really exciting pieces of that campaign work. But to tee up the conversation a bit more, Jade, I'd love it if you could start with an overview of the Climate Justice Campaign and how it came to be, and not just the campaign itself, but your connection to this overall body of work with climate justice. And feel free to introduce yourself a bit more too before you dive into that question.
Thank you, Sarah. I can I'm Jade Begay. Sarah did a great intro. So I don't think I need to repeat much of that. But I do want to share that I am based here in the Southwest in Santa Fe, New Mexico, also known as Oga. And we're here on Tewa lands. So my connection to climate justice. Sorry, we're having a bit of an echo. Okay. Let's see if we can address that. It's a bit distracting.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
For too long, so I didn't really tee up like the campaign. Um, check.
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 Bisha Iyongona, thanks so much for those of you that hung around. I know that we had a really long gap of interacting with you there for a little while, so glad you stuck around. And if you're just joining us, maybe we'll try to start a little bit at the top. So I'm going to just go back to a quick introduction because I think we might have a different audience now. So Bisha Iyongona, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Sunshine Manning, and I am the Director of Communications for NDN Collective, and here today to talk with two members of NDN Collective's Climate Justice Campaign team, Jade Begay, Director of the Climate Justice Campaign at NDN, and Kailea Frederick, Climate Justice Organizer. And we're here to talk about the official launch of NDN Collective's Climate Justice Campaign. It's been something that's been brewing for months now. I want to say at the start of the new year of 2021. Ever since then, this campaign has been building, and with so much intention, Jade built out this work, recruited an amazing team, and this week, as of yesterday, we officially started rolling out that work. And to back up and give a little bit of context too about how this work ties into what we do at NDN Collective, is NDN Collective as a national organization dedicated to building Indigenous power, who often sometimes does work across colonial borders in Turtle Island, across borders of so-called Canada, so-called Mexico, and surrounding island nations. So much of our work is devoted to supporting the self-determination of Indigenous peoples, to building justice and equity, not just for Indigenous peoples, but all people on the planet. Climate justice is a part of this work. The Climate Justice Campaign is also part of a larger Indian action strategy. We have 4 campaigns, and climate justice is one of those 4 campaigns, and is definitely dovetailed into all of those pieces, dovetailed into NDN Collective's overall mission. So that being said, we'll get back into the conversation, and maybe I'll just skip over the full introductions again, because I think if any of you were here at the top of the hour, we did fuller introductions, and we just started with one question, and I think that was as far as we got. So I appreciate you for being here. Also, I know that those of you that have been hanging around for a little while or just joining us, it would be really awesome if you could share this video right now. I think we lost some viewers as we were in our long be back soon frame. So it would mean a lot to us if you could help us to share the word now, or even if you're tuning in later. But with that, I'd love to pass the mic now to Jade Begay to get us started in this conversation. And I have a question for you first, Jade, and maybe before you get into this question, you could introduce yourself a little bit more. But I'd love if we can start with an overview of this work, an overview of the Climate Justice Campaign. As I mentioned, this has been something that you've been building with so much intention for months. You definitely just breathe so much beauty and thought and care into what we're seeing roll out, even yesterday with the video. So tell us how that started. Tell us a bit about how you got into this work of climate justice.
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, thank you everyone for bearing with us. You know how it goes with tech issues and Zoom world. So I appreciate all of the folks who stuck around and the folks who are rejoining. So yeah, Yate Bene, or I guess Yate now, it's past noon, at least here in New Mexico. And Tsamu, my name is Jade Begay. I'm from Tusuke Pueblo, and I'm also Dene. I live here in Oga, which is also known as Santa Fe, New Mexico. And as Sarah has shared before, I'm the Climate Justice Campaign Director here at NDN Collective. And yeah, I really, I come to this work from just a almost a lifetime, I would say, but definitely in the past 10 years working at the intersections of narrative change, cultural change, and climate change, climate justice, and environmental justice. For the last 10 years or so of my professional life, I have been doing this work and working primarily with Indigenous communities who are at the front lines of environmental injustice and climate injustice. So really working with tribes from North America, but also globally to address these issues and to fight for Indigenous rights and sovereignty and self-determination. And I also come to this work just for context. I've worked with bigger nonprofits, NGOs around climate justice and climate work, like 350.org. I've worked with Indigenous Environmental Network and different grassroots groups, again, across Turtle Island. So just wanting to share that background for, accountability, and just, I think it's important to know, who people are accountable to, and just the lineage of how we show up to this work. I just wanted to share that. And I think, from that experience really informed how I wanted to build out this campaign. I've certainly been in situations before where I've seen bigger NGOs or really any nonprofit kind of helicopter in with a big flashy campaign. Yet there's no real dialogue between that entity and then the people who are on the ground, the people who are being most impacted. And it's kind of that campaign or that, action is not really informed by what is really needed at the ground level, at the front lines of this climate crisis. So I really didn't want to repeat that pattern that you see with, flashy campaigns, really not understanding the deep needs of a community or a region. And so what we did was, from the very beginning of this campaign, we began with listening, just talking to various climate leaders, grassroots leaders from across Turtle Island, both here in the US and in Canada up north, or so-called Canada, I should say. And just really tuned into what has worked in the climate justice movement so far and what hasn't worked, and what kinds of things are people needing, what kind of solutions, what kind of resources, support are people needing right now, and how are we preparing? I think that's something that has been maybe overlooked or not as prioritized in the climate justice movement, is actual physical preparing. Not just with our skill sets and tools and materials, infrastructure, but preparing our nervous systems, preparing our mental capacity, our emotional capacity, because climate change, the climate crisis, brings a lot of fear with it, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of scary and kind of hopeless feelings. And so we need to prepare ourselves and kind of fortify ourselves in those ways too. So from that really a 2-month-long listening period, we then went into what I would call a chrysalis of gathering all of the information we gathered and really starting to build, what do we need to offer or what can we offer our communities? What can we provide? What kind of support can we create? And while we were listening, there are definitely places where we identified gaps. And so then the campaign design became about how can we support what is working and not recreate any wheels, and then how can we fill in the gaps that we identified. So it's been like 6 months of building. Kailea and myself, for the most part, we've built this campaign together since March, when we brought Kailea onto the team, which was a dream come true for me. Kailea and I go back. We've known each other for a few years, and I've said this before, and it's a little cheesy, but if I could have chosen anyone in the world, it would have been Kailea, and I'm so grateful that she joined our team. So I'll stop there, and we can get more into kind of, what our campaign entails, but just wanted to share that kind of origin story of how we grew and how we built this out.
Yeah, that was beautiful, Jade. Just how you shared context about the intentionality, even down to the point of thinking of like our nervous systems. It really shows. The Climate Justice Campaign team released their video, The Indigenous Dream, yesterday. If you didn't get a chance to see it, we'll drop it in the chat for you. And we'll also be sharing it at the end of this show. And at the beginning of this show, at the top of the hour, or actually at the bottom of the hour, we shared a teaser, a 30-second teaser of that. And in that clip, it's so clear that you put so much care and thought into the narrative, into the tone. Like, I felt like that was like a blessing to my nervous system. Now that you're talking about nervous system, that was such a salve to so much of the heaviness that is in our world today. There's the real fight in the work that we do to build Indigenous power, but we also have to, in that spirit of healing justice, always think of how we're caring for our nervous systems. And your campaign just feels really holistic in that way. And I appreciate that. That's how you guys entered into the space. That's how you came out the gate. Like, it feels beautiful. So I appreciate that so much, just even obviously as a member of the team, but like as a consumer, if you will, of that content. Like, it just felt really good. So happy you're here, and so thankful for your leadership, Jade. I mentioned at the top of this hour too or at the top of the conversation, that Jade used to be a part of our comms and narrative strategy. So bringing narrative, expertise and insight, being a storyteller, knowing how to build a campaign really beautiful. Like, you could see it, like it's just checking off just so many boxes that just feel good in the delivery. So I'm so glad you're here, Jade, and thanks for telling us more about that. And so you mentioned Kailea being the second member of the Climate Justice Campaign team that is also growing. And I know, Kailea, you also bring this wealth of experience as a mother, as just a beautiful human being that breathes life into this in such a beautiful way that you could just feel and hear. Kailea's voice was on the video again, and that was just like medicine for my soul too, like hearing your voice. And so with that, just share with us your connection to the climate justice space, your contribution to this campaign.
I just wanted to say I'm so glad that the feeling of what it is that we're trying to evoke in the video translated and cast a bit of an imprint into your own heart space. That really means a lot to know that it's being felt in that way. Just to kind of back up, I really do feel that so much of my work throughout my 20s, throughout my adult life, is really grounded in the youth climate justice movement. I'm coming up also on a decade of this being the focal point of where it is that I put my energy, how what it is that I put my time and effort into. I first came into climate justice work. I didn't even have the language for it at the time, but in my home community on the island of Maui, where there was a campaign, a ballot initiative that was to place a moratorium on the company of Monsanto that was for those that might not be aware, there's a lot of testing that happens throughout the Hawaiian Islands year round, because it's year round growing season of bringing together different pesticides and seeing what they do in combination with each other. And these testing sites are in proximity to schools, They are in proximity to people's homes. The runoff, we're seeing, like our honu, our turtles coming up with these like big ulcers on them. So, it travels in the wind. And we were seeing in some of our children's hair that you could actually see the chemical remnants of some of this exposure to pesticide, that, the testing that was happening. And so that was really the first time that I stepped into a campaign. This was back in 2013, 2014. And I, at that moment in time, I just thought to myself, isn't this what you're supposed to do? Or isn't it that you're just supposed to stand for your community, stand for your people? That was really the impetus, I would say, for how it is that I entered into some of this work. But yeah, no, actually, when I cast even, further back into my own personal story, as you had shared in my intro initially, Sarah, I was raised off the grid in a very, very rural part of the island. And now in this moment where it's not the impending climate crisis, but the climate crisis is actually here. Now that I'm a parent and I'm, raising a toddler under intensive drought restrictions in Sonoma County, California, where we've been ravaged by fires throughout the entirety of his existence here on Earth, I realized that this upbringing I had, which was in such close proximity to land and in a continual monitoring of how much water we used on a daily basis, because everything was a catchment system, how much energy, like how much light we put on in the evening, because all of that came from a tiny little homemade uh, electrical system that my father put together when in this 1970s, before this was like a thing that you could just go and buy like solar panels. I realize now that so much of this work is actually grounded in those perspectives that my parents really, really ingrained into me, which is that we have to be in a daily relationship with the earth. And also that there's another way to understand ourselves outside of just being a consumer of natural resources, and that there's actually a whole enriching way that I think we all have the opportunity to feel in that close proximity and that close relationship. So that's a little bit about some of my origin story, and definitely some of the heart that I'm bringing into this campaign work. Oh, I think you're on mute, Sarah.
Thanks. So a heads up for folks tuning in that there will, throughout the course of this week, be many more conversations with Jade and Kailea on Instagram Live. We'll be rolling out some graphics that let you know those dates and times throughout the week. So you're going to hear so much more from them, and they're going to be having a lot of really great conversations with leaders in the climate justice space, Indigenous leaders, Black allies, and just really digging into a lot of this conversation as well. And just wanted to plug that really quickly while you're here. So backing up a little bit into this concept of climate justice, I wanted to spend some time really rolling out what that means. So to Native people, to Indigenous people who are still even like really connected to their culture and the land, this concept might seem a little elusive, or a concept or a phrase that wasn't necessarily deriving from our own communities. But if you break it down, of course, like Indigenous people have been doing this work of climate justice in many different ways. And at NDN, since our audience and our constituents are our own people, from urban natives to Indigenous people in their home communities, fighting on multiple fronts, and of course we love and appreciate and value all of our allies too. But thinking of how to break down this complex concept in really digestible language, maybe the two of you can break that down for us. Like, what is climate justice? What is climate justice? What does that mean for Indigenous people? And then lastly, so it's kind of a three-part question, what excites you as an Indigenous person being a part of this work? So we'll start with Jade on that one.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. I'll try to remember all the questions. I might need a recap, but I think just tackling the question around what is climate justice. That was actually, I think, a question we really wanted to untangle or grapple with in the build out of this campaign, because it is elusive. It is, I think for the most part, the narrative of climate justice has been really spearheaded or maybe co-opted by non-POC or non-Indigenous organizations or NGOs. And so I think, for the past, if we can reflect on the past, maybe like 5-10 years, the climate work that maybe comes to mind is marching. It's the People's Climate March. It's these images of people, holding rallies at banks or against the fossil fuel companies. But I think we have a different vision for what climate justice is. And we're really here to share that with everyone. So excited to break it down. And I mentioned the process we went through initially to talk with and visit with and engage these various community leaders and climate justice leaders across Turtle Island about, what does it mean to them? What does climate justice really look like in practice to them? And a resounding sentiment that came through each of those interviews, and we did many, was that climate justice is about bringing people back to their land, that they want to see their families engaged with traditional ecological knowledge, using those ancestral skills and that knowledge to navigate this crisis, and honing in on those types of skills to and like I said, just building time and space with their communities to reconnect with those skills and learn them. So that's really been like a core piece of our campaign, and will continue to be. We're going to hold that lesson really really dear to our hearts in our work. That while we're out advocating on the Hill, while we're working at political levels and fighting, industry, that we're also creating pathways so that our people can be reconnecting with the land and their ancestral knowledge, because we already believe that our people have all of the skills, all of the knowledge they need to navigate this crisis. We just need time to connect with those skills. We just need resources maybe to host events, community events, to gather and reconnect with those skills. So that's kind of the balance we're holding in this campaign, is reconnecting with land while fighting against extractive industry and shifting our economy away from being dependent on industry, and also reducing the harm that industry causes towards our communities. If you look at almost any climate justice fight across Turtle Island, there's a pipeline involved, or there's an extractive company, oil company, or a company that's extracting natural resources. So we also want to reduce that harm that is happening, and that harm shows up in so many different ways beyond just extraction towards the land or violence towards the land. We see it in increased numbers of MMIR women and Two-Spirit folks. So we're really seeing all of the intersections of what climate justice is, and working to build those those solutions and those on the ground practices that really can address all of those aspects of what climate justice can be.
That was great. Thank you, Jade. And Kailea, anything to add there? Like what comes to mind for you when you think of just breaking down what climate justice is?
Mm-hmm. I feel like Jade, you just gave such an incredible, thorough answer and response there. But what I really want to hone in on is that because our identity as Indigenous peoples is so bound up with land, for me, climate justice is really just about the opportunity to be in relationship with our land, and how that actually leads to our liberation as Indigenous peoples. But I think it also extends beyond Indigenous peoples as well. I want to say that I think most people, when they have and are given the space and the opportunity to be in relationship with land, that gives a whole different perspective and worldview on what it means to walk through the world, what it means to step away from ideas of entitlement, perhaps, or ideas of extraction, ideas of capitalism that so often, I think, hound so much of the spirit of this society. And then the other thing that I wanted to get to is, thinking about climate justice and all that the injustice of the fact that many of the people who are experiencing the impacts first and worst are not really those who set them into motion. And so for some of these tangible reality checks around migration, around displacement, reallocation, needing resources in order to fully prepare their communities, that those resources are given freely and with ease, instead of oftentimes the huge amount of the fight, in order to even be seen or heard in what it is that our communities are experiencing and going through. So I think of, like, less of the fight is actually, I think, what climate justice should be. Even though the irony is that so much of this work, the climate justice movement, is the fight. But I think true justice should not be us having to continuously pound at the doors. It should be that we're seen in our humanity, and that we're deserving, and that our communities are deserving of being supported through a very, very big moment of change right now.
Yeah, and I think, to your second question, Sarah, about what excites me about this campaign, and I think, I hope I can speak for our team, but I think we, to build on what Kailea shared, we're really excited about the opportunity to lean into that, what we referenced in our video, and some of our initial launch materials about dreaming the Indigenous dream. Can we slow down enough in this moment during all of this collapse and entropy and chaos to really dream into what what we're really building, and how we want to navigate, and the types of relationships we want to build with land and with each other. I think there is a need for rest in this moment to really even begin to start dreaming and stepping into our full imaginations around the innovative ways we'll need to respond. I think we tend to be so what's the word, rapid responsive, that we lean on our old tactics, our old strategies, and this entire issue, the climate crisis, is going to require lots of innovation and imagination. We're going to have to think of tactics and strategies that have never been thought of before. So there's this whole like realm of possibility, I think, that we can lean into. We just have to create time and space to do that. So I hope with this campaign, and there's various components of this campaign. So we have storytelling, we have which includes like video and podcast. We have our policy work, of course, because we have to be engaged at that level. But we also have climate preparedness workshops and trainings that I think that will be the space for us to really lean into that dreaming, that imagination, that skill building with our community around practical skills, and also building, like I said before, those like emotional and mental skills and types of practices that'll help us prepare in that way for what's to come and what's already here.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate you giving that overview of what folks can expect. Really excited about the narrative work, the storytelling, since you're both such talented storytellers. And on that note, how about we go ahead and shift now to sharing with our audience the video that we've been referencing so much. If you haven't all seen it already, you are in for a treat. This is absolutely a stunning film, co-produced by Climate Justice Campaign team and a few members of our comms team, Willie White and Jordan Breen. So check it out.
Us around a curve that has been shaped by millennia of icy water and sun. What if the only back we're going towards is back into our bodies, into our ancestral ways, into our spirits, into the earth? What if we could imagine again, dream again? Climate justice is our dream, our balanced future taking shape on the landscape of our hearts, minds, and bodies. Climate, an English word meaning region, part of the earth, or slope of the earth, has come to be our way of thinking about the future. Climate asks us how we want to weather the future. It's about the rain, the heat, the sun, and the wind. Climate insists on humility as we welcome change, demands we bow in reverence to our grief and rage as we migrate, adapt, and innovate. Climate is the understanding that these weather realities shape how life unfolds down here on the surface of the earth, what becomes and what falls away. Justice, from Latin, meaning righteousness, equity, upright, just, is a question, a spiritual imperative to find alignment between action and grounded connection. It begs, we reckon, with the centuries of inequity within ourselves, so we may move with integrity and our dignity fully intact. Wrestled back from colonization, settled back in our bodies, settled back on our land. Climate justice is our vision that teaches us how to move in honest and bold ways, connected with what is occurring everywhere, in all of our homelands and communities, down here on the surface of the earth, under the forces of unknown weather. In this moment, we must dream the Indigenous dream. And so we dream climate justice.
And we're back. That was absolutely beautiful, amazing work on that storytelling and giving us a preview of what this campaign will be like and what we can expect. Just such beautiful imagery, sound, narration, just gorgeous. So thanks so much. This video is also on YouTube. If you check out Indian Collective's YouTube page, we also posted to Instagram. So definitely give us some love and like and share there. And much more storytelling to come from this amazing team. So an extra special shout out to some members of our team who helped to produce that film as well. So shifting to some of the other things that we alluded to a little bit before sharing that film. And this was some of the lessons that you both have learned. You both have this really rich experience already being involved in climate justice work. And of course, bringing in your own lived experience as Indigenous people being in those spaces and just living your lives, being connected to land that means something to you. If each of you can share some lessons learned from that work that you're coming into this space with, what are some of those lessons learned that are really shaping how you build out this campaign and pursue climate justice? And we'll start with Kailea here.
Thank you for that question. Appreciating the opportunity to reflect in real time with you all. I think there's a few things that immediately come to mind, especially when I kind of go back, a decade and I think about what the movement, how it, felt and looked publicly to me then, in the moment when I was invited in, and thinking about how important, narrative is and our ability to storytell. I definitely, a large part of how I've engaged in the climate justice movement over the last years has been through communications and storytelling work. I do editing with an independent publishing space called Loam. We're an arts and environmental publication, independent publishing zone. And so much of what we have been honing in on is the invitation. How is it that we invite people into this work? Because it is hard work. And how is it that through the invitation, we are setting ourselves up on the back end to really be restoring people at the same time, to be inviting them into something that is has the opportunity to fill our senses. I there has been such a critique, and I have felt this, especially, when I think about where we have come from, there's always this, like, it's so crunchy looking, or the feel like it's just okay. And so much of how, I want to be in this campaign is in the invitation, is really in reminding people that what we're actually doing is connecting. We're connecting with ourselves, we're connecting back with our communities, and we're connecting with our lands. And the experience of that is actually beautiful and profound. There's that opportunity for beauty in there. And the other thing that I want to name is moving at the speed of trust, and how absolutely critical our organizing stays in terms of relationality. I have considered myself a relational organizer again before I even had that language, but consistently thinking about how I tend to those that I'm working with, how it is that I'm checking in on, how it is that I am being a team member. And that is something that I really want to, that's, something I want to continue as we invite people in, is reminding them that this work is actually about building strong, deep relationships, because at the end of it, that's actually what's going to get us through. When we are in evacuation mode, or when we are, we're going through the rolling blackouts, as we also do here in the Bay Area, it's actually about who you know in your surrounding communities, and how it is that we're coming outside of our homes and putting our hands out together and saying, I'm here and you're here. How is it that we're going to make it through these next few days? How is it that we're going to make it through raising our children in truly unprecedented times? And so those are some of the lessons that I'm bringing forward in terms of what I've seen hasn't worked, and also how I feel when I'm in this work, truly grounded in relationality with others. And I'll pass it over to you, Jade.
Thanks, Kailea. Yeah, that's such a core piece of what we're trying to embed in this work. Was there a just checking, Sarah, was there a second part question? Should I build on that?
Sure. So just general lessons learned and how you're bringing those lessons into shaping out this campaign really differently, how it's different than some of the spaces that you've been in where you've seen some of these missteps or things that were just observances that you made as an Indigenous person that just didn't feel right in some of these experiences that you've had in climate justice movement work so far.
Great. Yeah, thanks for repeating. I think, there's a lot. I know I mentioned earlier this kind of pattern of building campaigns or strategies that really aren't informed by like the grassroots, the community that is experiencing the impacts first and foremost. I think that is. And that continues to play out. I think that continues to show up in movement spaces, even beyond climate justice. So I think just really holding that critique and that feedback that has come from communities really near and dear, and really working super hard to not perpetuate that pattern. So just continuously being in touch with those communities as we build a plan, as we talk about policies, and do they actually work for people? Do they actually address systemic issues that we know are the core of why climate change is happening? Capitalism, white supremacy, those big issues. Does the programming that we are building out really add value, or is it distracting? So those are the types of questions that we kind of assess and evaluate ourselves to keep us accountable to real impact at that front line, at that grassroots level. I think just, another thing, and this is me now like wearing a little bit of my comms narrative hat, just the erasure that we've seen in movement spaces of frontline stories or Indigenous stories. I think, let's think about like, and not only erasure, but the tokenizing of our voices that we've seen be so prevalent in the environmental or the climate justice movement or spaces. We're often brought in during a crisis. We're often brought in during a disaster, or I think we can say that, oftentimes when we hear an Indigenous voice, it's about when we're under some type of like victimization, like Standing Rock, or when we're under attack. And I think that's important. We need our voices to be elevated in those moments, for sure, of course, but we also need our voices elevated when we're thriving, when we're building and creating solutions that work, that are solid and true and tested, like community-based solutions. We need those stories amplified more and more and more. And so I think that's another aspect of our campaign, that we want to focus on the positive stories and the stories of strength. How we're really dealing with this crisis in courageous and brave ways and smart ways. I could go. We haven't even began to talk about the people in our network who are leading solutions, and just to say, climate justice is not the only part of NDN Collective that is doing climate justice work. We get to hold a lot of the advocacy, a lot of the climate justice programming and storytelling, but I would even go so far as to say like climate justice is just embedded in NDN Collective. Our dear friends over at NDN Fund, which is a impact investment arm of NDN Collective, they're doing amazing work to give loans and to give investing over to Indigenous entrepreneurs or Indigenous community leaders who are building regenerative agriculture solutions, who are building community-owned renewable energy projects. So we're involved in many ways in this type of work, but that's just it too. I think the way NDN Collective has been built or built out is a multi-pronged approach to really address all of these issues, and I haven't seen that model before. And I think that's a model. What we're doing is a model that can be replicated, and that should be replicated. NDN Collective doesn't need to be the only collective doing this work. I hope we're just an entity that can be inspiring to others. I really appreciate the way that we're building power in really driving resources to the front lines, to the grassroots, so that we can be really building those solutions on our terms, without dealing with gatekeepers, without dealing with white supremacy within the philanthropic world, the foundation world, and really just, trusting our people to lead. I think that's something I see NDN Collective and our team doing way more than a lot of organizations that are out there.
Well, just hearing that perspective too, and even hearing your lessons learned and what you're bringing, it makes me really excited to see each piece of this campaign. And there's obviously the launch where you're introducing the campaign with this really dynamic rollout of content and storytelling. But then there's the campaign that continues for months and years, that we see on the policy level, the organizing level, the direct action level. And so we're going to continue to see this unfold and blossom. And I'm excited, considering the things that the two of you both named, everything from relationships and how, in this world of capitalism and even just feeling like we constantly have to either be productive or working hard or moving fast or making a thing is why we're even in this position in the first place. And so that you're bringing a totally decolonized, flipped, way of entering into the work. It doesn't feel like that extractive go. You were obviously able to produce a beautiful campaign and do a lot of work behind the scenes, but it wasn't at the expense of those relationships, because you didn't operate in that go, extract, produce, make it happen. And then your relationships kind of fall to the wayside, and relationships are damaged sometimes in movement spaces because you want the goal, but how you pursue that goal, sometimes you're so hyper focused and zeroed in on that goal and tunnel vision to the goal, you forget that the relationships those are the things that sustain us. Those are the things that are regenerative. And as human beings who are all helping each other in this work, the way that we treat each other, that's almost all that matters in the end. And so just the way that the two of you are leading and creating that energy, that vision, it's just so inspiring. And I think I might have already said this already, not to be a broken record, but it's a breath of fresh air, and I am leading in and just so excited to see more. Another thing that I was hoping that you could talk about a little bit is Jade, you mentioned accountability and partners in that in this time of building this campaign for the past several months, you spent hours and days and months connecting to people, talking, making sure that these relationships were not just something to check off the list, like, oh, I talked to them, but let me establish like real consultation, real collaboration. Can you, number one, like, tell us, and I know, sorry, I'm giving a couple questions here, but tell us who some of the partners are in this work, and then how you're accountable, what your accountability looks like, not just with those partners, but in general, accountability as you do this work. And both of you can definitely answer this question too, but firstly, yeah, maybe share with us who some of those partners are in this work.
Sure. Yeah, this was a fun part of building out the campaign because there's so many groups doing really amazing work, and we didn't want to we really didn't want to like duplicate work. We have a motto. Well, I think I have a motto I projected onto the team maybe, but it's, just work smarter, not harder. I think that's a good one just for life. But yeah, we don't want to like I said, replicate what's already working. We want to honor what's working and ask, how can we do more of that? How can we, just make that, whatever it is, a strategy, a tactic, a model, more abundant, if it's working and if it's really helping folks. So, just we did a scan. We did some fun maps, movement mapping of who was really doing solid work. Again, like at that like community level, and a few groups that we identified have now become our our climate justice partners in this campaign. So Indigenous Climate Action, that is up north, across the Medicine Line in so-called Canada, that is led by Ariel Deranger, and we'll be joining Ariel for a conversation in a couple of days. Let's see, the folks behind the Red, Black, Green New Deal, Kailea will be in conversation with Valencia Gunner from there. The Red, Black, Green New Deal is in association and partnership. It's a program of the Movement for Black Lives. Native Movement, which is based in Alaska. An incredible organization that's led by women and femme and queer folks, doing amazing work in Alaska. With ICA and Native Movement, is really intentional because as I've done this work in the past, I've seen how we often jump to, it's like in the 11th hour that we bring in our relatives from these locations. It's like, oh, we need that representative from up north. We need that Alaskan rep. Again, lessons learned, not perpetuating patterns that we've, or missteps that we've seen in the past. So from the get-go, engaging with Native Movement and learning about the issues in Alaska and ICA and the issues that are facing First Nations up in so-called Canada, and really integrating those collaborations into the campaign early on. So it's not an afterthought. In fact, it's just a part of how we work and how we want to build like transnational and multicultural and tribal nation solutions and approaches to climate justice. We want to be thinking of these folks as we build from the start. So that's what we did. And then of course there's ITEP, which I always space on the acronym, but maybe that's where I can pass it to Kailea to share. Let me just I'm so sorry that I'm spacing out the acronym, but ITEP, who does amazing research on climate work happening within Indian country and works with tribes to build climate adaptation plans. So even working at that like tribal governmental level to identify how can we build education and awareness with our own tribes, because I think that is another place that or another area that gets forgotten in the climate justice movement and the environmental movement. We think, tribal councils or governments are too rigid or, to this or that. And again, it's just about like, how can we extend resources and time and capacity to build education, to build awareness about what these issues are and build capacity. Oftentimes people just don't know what questions to ask. People just don't know what resources there are to access to be able to build the climate plan, to be able to invest in infrastructure. And so we want to be there as support, alongside our partner, this organization, to support tribes in that way and tribal leadership in that way. Do you want to say anything more about that, Kailea?
Just wanting to echo, having gone through all of 2020, I spent on the Petaluma Climate Commission with putting together a climate emergency framework that we delivered to our city council, which then led to our city being granted the ability to put together an actual climate plan, and having a little bit of insight into that process in terms of how do we actually have our local governance systems on board with this work in terms of investing into the infrastructure that we need and investing directly into the community. And as Jade said, this being something I think in the climate movement kind of broadly is often overlooked and not understood, because it's definitely, it's inside out, outside kind of strategy. And I think we're so often used to positioning ourselves on the outside. But having sat in there, now understanding how critical it is that we have representation in those spaces. And in terms of the work that the ITEP initiative is doing out of the Northern Arizona University, how absolutely critical it is. Oftentimes, these adaptation plans that communities need support with putting together, they're really expensive. It's expensive to hire a consultant. It's expensive in the amount of time that it takes. It's expensive in just resources across the board. And it's not necessarily an easy process. And so much of the work that they're doing is almost like an onboarding of tribes into getting them their adaptation plans put together. Because once you have that adaptation plan, it opens up a whole other avenue of funding and potential investment and into tribes on the ground. And so just wanting to say that we partnered with them because this work is critical. When we kind of assess, it's like there's the anti-extraction work always, there's those like on the ground fights for, against the pipelines. And also our communities really, really need to be prepared. And so what is it that is going to make that possible, so that it's not just, like one little neighborhood here trying to band together, that it becomes an overarching lens that our governance systems are viewing our, everything through. So just wanting to affirm that like that work is critical. And I feel really, really grateful for our partnership with ITEP and just all of the brainstorming we've been employing already in terms of how we support more tribes in getting that support from them and getting their plans put together. Because at the end of the day, we need investment as well. So it's a way to signal to the federal government that we're ready to be invested in and take funding.
And just for reference, it's Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals. They're the partner that we're talking about.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate hearing all of these amazing partnerships, because those partnerships are accountability, and it's not just, again, for the sake of saying, we're in partnership, but it's like real true partnership in that, these conversations in this base building over the past several months, obviously took feedback from all these partners as well. And so shifting to the next topic, I was hoping that the two of you could expand on a little bit more, noting that, these partners help to shape this narrative, help to shape this vision. It was, this building, this bubbling under the surface that nobody got to see, but now we get to see it. And so now hearing who those partners were, like, I think of them, and I think of Native movement, I think of who they're accountable to in so-called Canada, and that, so your overall relationship to not just these organizations, but all of their communities who they're accountable to is really beautiful to imagine. On the narrative note, though, there's obviously so much more that's going to be rolling out this week, and narrative being such a really critical component of campaign work. Share with us, some of those underlying values and creative narratives that excite you most about this vision of NDN's Climate Justice campaign. And either one of you can dive in on this one first. Let's go with Jade. Let's just make it easy. Sorry.
Yeah. I think underlying values that excite me about this campaign are just this question that we asked it's the first line of our video. What if the best times are ahead of us? For me, that question is really rooted in abundance, in an abundant mentality, and trying to embody that during this moment where we're seeing the ocean on fire and where we're seeing ice quakes up north in the Arctic. It feels like an impossible question to begin with, because how could the best times be ahead of us? It's already so dark and grim. But if we're able to, again, just rooted in abundance, rooted in the idea that we can thrive in the future, we then make it so that can be, right? That's why we are here. That's why we're organizing. That's why we're doing the inside outside strategy, so that we can have that future. It might be harder. It might be hotter. It might be more scrappy, and we might not have like all the amenities that we're really used to right now. But what if we're closer? What if we're in healthier relationship to each other and to the planet? What if there's more harmony? And that's sort of what that question is trying to evoke or get us to be thinking about. Can we lean into abundance and really imagine what it would take to be in a place in the future where we're actually better, because we've built solid relationships with our neighbors, because we have climate plans, and we've built the muscle to respond, not in rapid urgency panic, but in grace and ease. So that's kind of one value that I think I feel most excited about. What about you, Kailea?
This made me think of the podcast that we're about to share, in a wider way across our platforms today. But when putting together the podcast, we were thinking, what is it that we're trying to bring here? And as Jade had already mentioned, neither of us are trying to create more noise for the sake of noise. That's never our intention with any of the content that we are putting energy into, one, like having to create, and also putting out there publicly. And the thing that came back to us is wanting to expand the perspective, and also expand the idea, or the identities that people hold in terms of what it means for them to be a part of the climate justice movement, in terms of them to feel like their work is seen and valued and that there's a place for it. And so for me, that is so much of one of the values that I'm infusing into this campaign and into this narrative going forward. I already touched on how important the invitation is, but I keep waking up with these words. I think it was after the heat dome that hit the Pacific Northwest, the town of Lighton that had the 2 or 3 days of heat records breaking, and then it burning down on like the third day in a 15-minute span because of the lightning storms. In that week where I really was like, it's here, like we have crossed a point in time, I kept waking up with the words in my head. I am strong enough. I am brave enough. I am smart enough to do this. And that is actually the message that I want to impart to all of our people, is that we are in fact strong enough. We are in fact smart enough. And I certainly strongly believe that we hold the courage within our hearts to really honestly address what it is that we're going to be, or what it is that we are moving through right now. And a part of the affirmation, I think, is I think we're in this moment of like really people are starting to reassess. And I think it's critical and important that the reassessment happens, in terms of people kind of looking around in their own life and thinking, how is it that, what is it that I do? And how is it that I might pivot this, or how is it that it might serve in a different way? And that question, I think, is so critical, and is something that I really I want to just open up more space for. I want to tell like all of the parents, like, your work is so absolutely critical right now. I often, there's this feeling that I get from people that are not in this work, quote unquote, that there's somehow this like secret way to get involved, or however it is that they're showing up in their life, it doesn't have a place. And that's what I want to shift. I want all of us to be reassessing and opening up our arms a lot wider to think about how it is that we can each be playing our part. And so that's a value that I'm holding, and a vision that I'm seeding right now.
Beautiful. All of those values are so evident in what each of you share, and also what's been shared also so beautifully in the video. So pivoting to that, like the rest of the rollout this week and the launch, maybe you can give us a preview of what else is to come. Number one, for the launch this week, what can folks look forward to? You mentioned some of those things, but maybe just share a little bit more about what folks can look forward to in the coming days and the remainder of the week for this launch, and then into the future for climate justice for Indian Collective.
Sure. Do you want to share about the week, and I can do the long term?
Yeah, I think we can toggle back and forth.
Cool.
Yeah, so throughout the rest of the week, as we mentioned, we're going to be having some Instagram live conversations with some of our core partners. So tomorrow morning, bright and early on my time, 8 a.m. Pacific, I'll be having a conversation with Valencia Gudner from Movement for Black Lives. The following day, Jade, I believe you'll be having a conversation with ICA, Indigenous Climate Action. And then on Friday, I'll be having a last conversation with Native Movement. And, as we have shared, so much of, what it is that we're wanting to do is really just uplift our partners' voices and the work that they're doing, and really create space for them to share, and let people know how it is that they can be forwarding the work that they're moving forward really rapidly right now. We're going to be coming out with our podcast, Our intro podcast, I believe, episode is up and live. And then in the following weeks, we have some episodes that are already recorded. So we'll be sharing those out. And yeah, we have a fun little collaboration with the Indigenous illustrator and artist Allie McKnight. We have some coloring pages that are going to be coming out. Really thinking, that project was trying to think about a way to invite families into starting to hold these conversations with their little people in their lives. How do you open a conversation about something that's so big and scary in a really safe, gentle, and loving environment? And also, how do we as organizers, it's like I found myself coloring some of these pages with these really beautiful illustrations and messages. So also something just for the nervous system to kind of like relax into. I think that's like a little snippet of what is to come in the rest of the week. Just some, we might have a few other things coming that I kind of want to hold back on sharing, divulging all of them. But maybe Jade, you could share briefly a few things about what's coming in the year, and I'll also come back in and there's a few other things that I want to share in terms of long vision that we're building out on right now.
Sure, yeah. So back in February, we, I believe, February, March, April, like there was a lot of movement and mobilizing around Dakota Access pipeline and shutting the pipeline down for good. And so we mobilized in the moment. We've been involved. There's been an active petition. We led an action in Washington, D.C. and projected some visuals onto the Army Corps of Engineers headquarters building in D.C. And so that is work that we are very much committed to. There are many issues with that pipeline. It's currently operating illegally. It's violating treaty rights, Indigenous rights, UNDRIP. It's violating FPIC, and the list goes on. So we're working right now on a report about Dakota Access Pipeline to really highlight these technical issues that are, illegitimate and wrong about this pipeline. So in the coming weeks, we'll be sharing that report out. So you all can look forward to seeing that. And I want to make a shameless plug for our NDN newsletter. We mentioned earlier that we want to be connectors and weavers in the sense of bringing resources and bringing materials to our communities. So that's going to be one of the best ways to keep track of we'll amplify grants that, we have that NDN makes available to our community. We'll amplify federal grants that can be used to build infrastructure or invest into infrastructure around climate. There's dollars that will be coming forth with the infrastructure plan, whatever it ends up looking like. And believe us, we believe, that we are organizing on that front to make sure that those dollars are make their way to the front lines, make their way to the grassroots. So just follow our work so that you're aware when those dollars become available to tribal communities and Native communities and peoples. So that's a good way to engage with future work. Beyond pipeline anti-extraction work, we're really excited about the opportunity to build data around how our people experience climate change. So another area where, and specifically Indigenous Native people, I just say our people and I feel like it's understood, but I want to be clear. So far right now, it's really hard to find like hard stats, statistics around how we specifically Native, Indigenous, tribal people within the United States experience climate change or have been, and what our priorities are when it comes to climate change. So we want to be able to explore what does it look like to have that data. So that's what we're doing, very much in development, but we hope to be able to build power in that way. Numbers matter, data matters, especially when we're talking about legislation or politics. And next year is a midterms year. So, and a lot of climate-related policy will be at stake. So, yeah, we have to be really communicating and making visible how exactly we are impacted by climate change. And so that's one way we hope to do that. And again, kind of build power as far as having information and data about our people. Do you want to share more, Kailea?
Yeah, I'm going to also add just that, with Jade and I both having a storytelling background, that a lot of the work we're really, really excited about this coming year is digging into some very deep narrative work around some of our communities up north. We're looking to do some shared work really specifically with our partner Native movement. So I've been just deep in brainstorming around that. And then also we will be at the UN Climate Week in the September 20th through the 26th. And our campaign also will likely be at COP26 this year. And we're in the middle of putting together a small publication that we'll be bringing to both of these events that feature a real kind of, I would say, deep dive into the climate justice movement as it stands now, with an opportunity to openly address false solutions and then dig into actual solutions, such as investing into Indigenous communities, investing into our Black relatives and their communities, investing into the youth, and then a bit of an overview around some of the frameworks that are forthcoming right now, like the Red, Black, Green New Deal, like the Breathe Act. So it's a whole. This is something that we're truly in the midst of putting together right now, with a whole bunch of our different allies and partners, and I'm feeling really, really excited about that. So that'll be released in September. And the other thing that is going to be forthcoming in spring of 2022 is our campaign's actual policy platform, which is something that we'll be developing out with our policy director, Lucia Maddox, who's here at NDN Collective, who is so incredible to work with. We're really, really lucky to be able to have her. She brings so much energy and so much brains. She has such an amazing mind. But we're looking forward to building out, a proper policy platform that very clearly articulates our way forward through our lens, and some of what it is that we're actively supporting and backing, so that we can be a real clear directive to our broader network in terms of starting to get really politically engaged. Because, as Jade had touched on, our vision is really about getting people back into the relationship with their land. But we also both hold this understanding that we need to be also very actively politically engaged at the same time. So that's some of what it is that we'll be building into.
Looking forward to all of that and seeing all of the love in the chat, and just want to acknowledge our viewers here who have stuck with us or joined us a little bit later, or maybe watching after the fact. We see your questions, we see your remarks. Thank you so much. Definitely some excitement for your storytelling in media, and appreciation for your thoughtful voices and intentionality in what you've shared with us so far. I know I'm also looking forward to those coloring pages. I'm definitely into the release and moment to just, exercise our creativity, even if it's coloring within somebody else's lines. It's like such an important part of our humanity, not just for kids, but adults. And so thank you for giving us that space and that opportunity. And thank you for thinking of our young ones in those coloring pages. I know that I'm excited also to share some of those out with loved ones too. And so even in just like the splash of information that's coming in this first week of launch, like you can tell you're thinking of so many people. Like there's a lot of pieces here, but you're thinking of so many different audiences and so many different threads. And so just to wish you both continued care in your work, like care or healing and rejuvenation and support of whatever is meaningful to you too, and that you also get back what you've put into it. I know this has been a haul creating all of these beautiful things, and I can't wait to hear the podcast, all the things too. So I'm just as excited and fangirling as much as our audience in the chat here. But with that, I also want to say too that there's going to be many more conversations. You're going to get to hear Jade and Kailea on the podcast. You're going to get to hear them on IG Live. So we do see the questions. We're tracking your questions, but unfortunately, for the sake of time today, we're not going to be able to get to all of your questions here. But just promising you, we see them. As you've heard here with Jade and Kailea and how they framed up their campaign, they're all about listening to the people, and so appreciate you. You are all why we do this work at Indian Collective. But with that, to close out, I'd love Jade and Kailea, if the two of you can share just some closing thoughts for our audience here, just kind of recapping, your excitement and what's maybe just a little teaser of inviting folks to get involved. So we'll start with Kailea. Just any closing remarks that you have for our viewers and our audience and our communities.
So there's a few different ways. So just wanting to name that regarding the podcast, we're really open to pitches. So please, if there's someone that you feel we should be talking to, maybe it's you, please reach out to us. I think, we're really, really wanting to just like open that as a community container. We also are putting together supporting workshops happening in different regions that can be based around climate preparedness and also just like practical skills like seed saving. And so we're really open to ideas and pitches regarding that as well. Like, is there a workshop that wants to potentially happen where you live? Do you have an idea? Like, we would love to hear from you. That would be another great thing. And also wanting to name too that we have this new webpage that just launched yesterday, and I was just trying to look for it. I'm wondering, can one of you like chime in and let me know if it's NDNClimateJustice.org? Is that right? As far as the link?
It's switched. It's Climate Justice. ClimateJustice.NDNCollective.org.
Okay, got it. So that is where you can find all the information in terms of some of what our campaign has put out thus far, and a way to reach out to us and to send us ideas. And then Jade and I we're both on Instagram. Jade is like one of my most favorite people to follow, even before we work together. But your handle's at Jade the Mighty. I'm at Earth is Ohana, and that's another great way to reach out and give us ideas and ask questions as well. Any other thoughts, Jade?
Yeah, thank you for sharing about the climate preparedness workshops. That was going to be my main plug. We have one scheduled for the month of October where, this is Chester. These guys always got to make an appearance. In October, we'll be hosting a a workshop here in New Mexico on adobe making. So this is just an example of like the skills that we want to be creating, again, access to for our network and our community. You know, adobe is an amazing building material that can create really sufficient and sustainable homes, you know, good for keeping you cool in the summer, warm in the winter. And these are the types of solutions, you know, we want to be creating more of. So yeah, if you have any idea of a climate preparedness workshop, please get in touch with us. We want to make it happen. And yeah, I think you covered like how to stay engaged with us. Again, we'll be producing a newsletter for climate justice work specifically. So sign up for the NDN Collective newsletter on our website, ndncollective.org. And I think that's all for now. Yeah, thanks for staying with us throughout all the tech difficulties and through our long-winded overview of this new campaign.
Thanks, Jade and Kailea. And Chester for making that appearance. Love Chester. And we'll drop the link to the website for the Climate Justice Campaign in the chat or in the thread here. And we'll also drop the link for how to subscribe to our newsletter. But check out that website, climatejustice.ndncollective.org. There you'll already see the video that was just rolled out. There you'll also find the first episode of the podcast and eventually the coloring pages and all sorts of other storytelling and ways that you can get involved. But with that, I think we'll go ahead and close out. And if there's more you want to know, promise you there's going to be more this week. So follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook for a rollout of content throughout the remainder of the week. But again, thank you so much, Jade and Kailea. Thank you to our producer in the background there, Lorenzo, holding it down through our tech difficulties. You know, we do our best over here, but we're also sitting in our homes. Our cats go by, you know, relatives are knocking at my door. Like, that's the reality of the work that we're doing too. And it's just real. But yeah, glad you're all here and look forward to supporting Jade and Kailea in this work. So thanks again, everyone. And we will see you next time and hopefully with a little less technical difficulties. So see you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.